What's going on, y'all? KM Best here, joined by Lamby series. Together, we are 8 Cubes, and we cover the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap. And I think we wanted to start this one off with a overview of how the meta is looking. And I would describe it at a rough sketch as a meta that is much more interested in going big than previous metas. And this is due to the influence of the Living Tribunal combo deck, as well as I've seen plenty of Hella decks out there. There are a lot of people who are just totally opting out of the mid-range attrition battle and opting into just, I'm going to draw my combo and I'm going to drop it on your head. Lamby, what do you think of this metagame development?
Yeah, I want to talk specifically about the Living Tribunal deck because I see that a lot in my own ladder
Mm-hmm.
and like play experience. The deck is one of those decks that like to me it's more of like one of those decks that is like simply boring but simply good. Like
Mm-hmm.
it just wins if it gets its like stuff going and you have no counters, right? Like I've been playing Rogue and Loki, and Rogue is not enough to deal with the amount of power of ongoings that they can put out if you have no other card to counter it. Like if you don't have Enchantress, for example, and even if you have Enchantress, some of them are actually playing Cosmo. Like the less all-in builds are playing Cosmo just to get a simple combo off, which also blocks Enchantress. So I think Tribunal is one of those spots whereby I personally feel like it's super oppressive in the sense that like if you're not ready for it, can you imagine like if you play a Conquest
Yeah.
and you hit a Tribunal deck and you just have no tech for the Tribunal deck, it's like such a free win for the deck. So yeah, I like where it's positioned at right now. I don't like the fact that I have to keep playing it, but like it's an actually legitimate option against the meta right now.
I actually was in that situation. I was playing Tribunal. I ran into a member of your Discord, Teledad
Uh-huh.
man, and
Uh
he was playing a bounce deck and he had absolutely no answers for it. And it would have been
yeah.
100% free, except he ran Iceman and the Icebox flipped up
Oh.
a bunch of times. And it turns out, actually, if you have enough Iceman procs, sometimes you need the Icebox to help. That matchup becomes a lot closer. So, one thing I do think should be kept in the back of people's minds right now is decks that run a lot of top end because of their combo are actually
Mhm.
uniquely vulnerable to Iceman in terms of disrupting the exact turns they need to be playing stuff on. It is a bit of an interesting situation that I found myself in because I still won the conquest, but it's like, oh man, Iceman's actually really, really strong against this. Just something I want people to keep in the
True.
back of their mind. Cards like Iceman, cards like Spider Ham can actually disrupt it in a proactive way some of the time. Another major discussion topic in the past week has been why is Loki so good for people like me and you and so bad for seemingly everyone else? The stats on websites like Untapped have it as like a very mediocre deck, whereas since the patch, my Loki deck that I've been tweaking and moving around with, I am like 68% win rate with and very positive on cubes, nearly a 1 cube ratio with it, which is like that's pretty good. I feel like that's pretty okay.
Yes.
And I am sort of looking at this and saying, like, all right, why is this only really a thing at high elo? Why is it everywhere else in the game? Like Loki's skill curve, I thought it was pretty distinct, but now I'm feeling like it might even be more distinct than I thought. Where like if you're in top 100, most people are like, oh yeah, that's the best deck. But if you're like not, most people are like, I don't really know. I never see this. I never see this. No one plays it anymore. I get a lot of comments like that. And it's very, very odd because people talk about it like it's a meta thing, right? Like, oh, no one plays Loki in my meta. And what it actually is no one is good enough to play Loki well, I think. It's a very odd thing. As like a preeminent skill gamer Loki player, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so initially I also thought that like okay, maybe it's just people not used to the Loki meta and not used to like playing against or with the card and deck,
Hmm.
right? But like it's been 2 months, right? It's been 2 months. And I do feel like it is very evident that Loki is that one deck in the game that has the most skill expression right now. Like it's very evident if you know what you're doing and you don't know what you're doing with the deck. Like it's super evident. Like from like my perspective, if like I'm playing against a Loki player that knows what they're doing, you just know they know what they're doing. But if they don't know what they're doing, it's also very obvious because like they're just all over the place and like they're clogging themselves, they're
Yeah.
bouncing stuff in the wrong places, you know that kind of thing. So like, this deck is really one of those like super high skill expression decks whereby if you're not like a very dedicated player to the game, you won't feel like you really want to invest the time and effort to learn all this stuff. But like if your goal is to win, like this deck is like just learn it. It's
Yeah.
very, very how should I put it? Very worth your time in a sense. Like to be better than your opponents at playing this deck. I think it's super important that people start to realize that it's not really about the meta. It's about the fact that the deck rewards your effort.
Yeah, I also wanted to point out like I'm going to just start listing things that you have to consider in Loki that you don't have to
Yes.
consider in most other decks. Feel free to jump in whenever you want if I miss any.
Uh,
Thing number one, you have to consider whether you're a Loki deck or you're a tech deck, right? You're playing multiple tech pieces and you need to figure out if they're good. If you have one of them in your hand, you got to really consider whether you actually want to be playing the card Loki at all.
mm,
Then you have to find out, okay, am I willing to wait a turn on this Loki to get more value out of it, or do I have to fire it now? And a lot of that is dependent on the average card quality of your opponent. Like if you have a choice between a 4 Loki on 4 and a 6 Loki on 5, because you have, say, a snow guard in hand, that's going to be a lot dependent on what you're going to get out of what your opponent has. If they're a Thanos deck, I'm very happy with a 4 Loki on 4 because that means I'm almost always getting some really good stuff for me to play on 5 anyway. But if they're a different deck, I'm not as happy with a 4 Loki on 4 some of the time. And I
yeah.
think that there's that consideration. There's also the what do I have to do to set up my board for benefiting the most from what I'm going to get from the Loki. And an example of this would be like if you're playing against a deck with Beast and Falcon in it, you should set up your board so that if you get their Beast and Falcon, you are in an advantageous position as well. And then there's the other considerations that I don't even know if I have an answer to. Like in the mirror, do you shoot off a Loki as fast as possible, or do you greed for a turn 5 Loki when the counterplay to that is your opponent Lokiing early and then getting your card draw stuff plus their own plus another Loki, and then they're just so far ahead that your turn 5 Loki can't win it back. And then there's like, do I use this Loki or do I keep my collector under Shang range stuff? There's like so much stuff that you have to think about every time you play it, and I think that's just like an abbreviated list. Do you think I missed any in that abbreviated list?
The funny thing is, I'm pretty sure you did, but I can't even exactly tell
I
you
know I
what
did.
exactly you missed.
Yes. Like
Because like honestly, okay, so some of the things you listed are like super real, right? Like because I've played like thousands of games with this deck. So the whole thing whereby you decide whether to Loki on 4 or 5 is super evident. Whether you Loki on 4 or 5 also depends on the matchup. Like
yeah.
one example, like if you're playing on Destroy, you want to Loki as late as possible because all you want to do is grab the death, and now you don't want to grab the stuff that builds up to the death, and now you want to let them to do that for you, right? Just let them do all the destroy stuff, then you grab the stuff that wins the game. In the mirror, sometimes, well, if you have collector, you can Loki early to grab another collector and do another Loki again. Or like if you're already holding the Shang in the mirror, you also need to think like, all right, is he ever gonna make this collector big enough for me to Shang? And if that's the case,
Yes.
should I hold the Shang? Should I Loki into his Shang so I can play more stats plus his Shang and then win harder? You know, that kind of thing. It's like I can't tell you it's correct or wrong. You just gotta
Yeah.
see it and do it and realize that okay, this game, this is correct. This game, this is correct. The other game, these are all wrong. You know, that
Yep.
kind of thing. So it's very situational. And once again, back to the point where I mentioned earlier, which is this is one of those decks that really rewards effort in the game. And I do understand that some people don't think it's worth the effort, which is fine. But then stop complaining about losing to people that put in the effort.
Yeah.
That's all I
Like
can say.
I think one heuristic I can offer you is your Loki timing is dependent on your opponent's average card quality. If you
Okay.
need to spike like 1 or 2 cards, you have to Loki greedily. If most of their cards are good for you, you can just kind of fire him off a decent amount of the time. Like
Yeah.
Thanos, it's like very few things can ever stop you from Lokiing on 4. Like very few things are going to stop you from doing that because you're going to get like, a 4 cost blue marvel or whatever, and then just like play a 1 drop and a 4 cost blue marvel on your 5. And it's just like, well, that's really good. And that's like the kind of thing that you're sort of looking at where like if most of their cards are good for you, you don't have to be as judicious with your Lokis and making sure you're greeting them for like big turn 5 plays. You can just fire them off a decent amount of the time. That said, that can go as early as turn 1, right? So like if you see that your opponent is playing Thanos and you have like a Snow Guard, a Loki, and a Collector in hand, a lot of the time your instinct will be you're going to save that for making your collector bigger. And if you know you're Lokiing on 4, you actually mostly don't want to do that. You want to play the Snow Guard out and then play the collector because you're going to be Lokiing on 4 anyway. So if you draw something that's going to take up that turn 3, maybe a beast, who knows, you're going to want to actually have that energy available. So you play the Snow Guard out now instead of saving it to get 2 extra points on the collector a lot of the time. And there's a lot of like just weird things like that where like even going into turn 1, you need to be planning for turn 4 because that's how you play the matchup. And I think Loki has probably more of those situations than any other deck.
Yep. Just want to add one last thing, which is also I feel like because Loki is also utilizing the bounce engine, what KM
Mhm.
mentioned about planning out your turns is super important, right? Because you don't want to be in a position where you're caught with no hand space to bounce what you need back, or like bouncing stuff too early and then realizing that, oh, I actually can draw more one cost cards to bounce later. And like all these things matter with respect to when you're gonna play the Loki card as well. So like if you're gonna play the Loki card on turn 4, you probably wanna do your bouncy stuff way before that. Or you can be like, oh, they have a lot of one cost cards. Let me Loki into their one cost stuff. Then I top deck Beast and then bounce it back again. You know, it's very, very technical. So like, yeah, it's very case by case. But at the end of the day, I feel like to learn Loki, you gotta play.
Yep.
And to yeah, you just really gotta play the deck. That's all I can say.
Before you were a Loki gamer, you were a Thanos gamer.
Yes.
Thanos is a deck that I think still exists, but in order to exist, it is now much more of a high roll deck. You're playing Lockjaw, you're playing Wave, you're just cheating stuff out as fast as possible. I am currently using the Human Spiders build, but instead of Professor X, I have a Doctor Doom in there. I got that from Batman. It's just like, oh yeah, we can do that again now that we're a Killmonger deck. We can play Doctor Doom again. It's nice. And that helps because we are very bad. Thanos is very bad into the card Miss Marvel. Like it's just not a card that you want to see. And switching Professor X for Doctor Doom makes you significantly better into the card Miss Marvel because now you have your own little guy you can cheat out. You can like Doom off of a lockjaw or whatever, and that's like phenomenal. It's very, very, very good. And Thanos' weakness tends to be like decks that can attack all 3 lanes because your final turn is very often a blob. And so being able to sort of attack all 3 lanes yourself helps you out in a big way. That said, I'm not sure what space Thanos occupies in this metagame because it's not going over the top of something like Tribunal, which puts it in an awkward spot. Previously, it was going very over the top of those decks, of most of those decks, by like, say, with a Hella deck, what it would do is just, lock down a lane with Professor X and then say Blob is bigger than the rest of what you have. And in previous metas, Hela was the thing going over the top, and it had a viable plan there. Against Tribunal, it's actually pretty hard for the deck to have a viable plan unless you run dedicated hate, and that puts Thanos in an awkward situation. What is your read on Thanos' space in this current metagame?
I think Thanos is generally, as you say, quite unfavored into the Tribunal deck, specifically the Tribunal deck. I think it might even be worse for Thanos versus Tribunal than Thanos versus Loki, to be honest. Because,
Mm.
like, the Tribunal deck it's completely one sided, uninteractive. And Thanos has, like, no counters to it, outside of, like, if you hard run Enchantress, which is something that's very difficult to do in an 18 card deck. Like, it's difficult to get it on queue. On the Thanos specific note, though, I feel like I'm also running the Human Spiders Lockjaw build right now, but I'm playing instead of Prof, I'm playing Leech. So
Sure.
my thing with Leech is that Thanos is one of those decks that can get out the early Leech, like how you get out the Professor X. Plus,
Yeah.
with Lockjaw, you can randomly spawn a Leech out of nowhere as well, going into turn 6, which is the craziest thing ever. Like you snap, they snap back, you stone into Leech going into turn 6, and they're like, oh shit, that kind of thing. Yeah, so Leech is not something that I like to play on turn 5 because it's really weak, obviously. But the thing is, if it randomly appears or you get it out early, it just warps the whole game because your big stuff are never gonna get shanked on 6. You can very safely play out cards. You are sometimes gonna get top deck, but that's not what you play around because you play Leech, right? You play Leech so you don't worry too much about getting top deck. But yeah, I'm finding quite a bit of success with Leech in the Thanos Lockjaw deck. And also, of course, the deck just naturally can run Killmonger Death, which does make the percentages versus Loki slightly better. Not saying it's favor, just slightly better. So this deck now, I would say, I would still put it in tier 1 in the game right now, but on the very low end of the spectrum for tier 1.
Yeah, I feel like it got a decent amount worse because A, more people are playing Loki now. Like there were other viable options, and now people are just back on Loki because they nerfed like a nihilist bounce or whatever. And
Yep.
B, the Tribunal deck is around now. And C, Thanos is a deck full of ongoings, so it's taking splash hate from all the people teching against the Tribunal deck. And so it ends up in this spot where it's like the plan is good, but you're going to run into a lot of stuff that is just incidentally strong against you. And that's tough to deal with.
Yeah, I've seen random decks that happen to have a Zabu in there also tack in Super Scroll,
Yeah.
which is very real right now. Like Super Scroll versus Tribunal decks actually is one way that lets you scale upwards in one lane, right? Because the moment they play Iron Man and you have Scroll in that lane, you win that lane because you have stats plus your stolen Iron Man in that lane. Then you need to worry
Yeah.
about another lane. But the Tribunal like introduction into the game right now really has pushed Super Scroll like into like the spotlight again. And like you said, the splash hit from
Yeah.
things like Super Scroll and Ench really hurt the Thanos deck a lot.
The interesting thing is, I think the best techs against the Enchantress deck are, or not the Enchantress deck, well, the Tribunal deck are Enchantress and Mobius. And
Mm,
those are the ones that, like, I would be putting in more of my decks, right? I am putting in more of my decks. I'm not as big on Super Scroll as most other people seem to be because I feel like it puts itself in a very awkward spot where it's like, aha, yes, nice Super Scroll. I am going to rogue it. Now it is my Super Scroll in matchups that are not Tribunal. Like people talk about it like it's good against Darkhawk, and it's like, kind of. But the card Leech in the Darkhawk deck sort of pins you between either holding it for late or playing it early. And if you're holding it for late, it gets leeched. And if you play it early, it gets rogued. And it's just like, it's this very awkward positioned card where like I almost just tend to prefer the ones that are cleaner answers because Super Scroll, like the way to play around Super Scroll is usually with the Tribunal deck. The way to play around Super Scroll is with Onslaught because Super Scroll won't actually give itself the Onslaught Iron Man
yep.
buff. It has to be another card in the lane. So as long as the Tribunal deck avoids doing something like Mystique Onslaught, right? Or you are unable to Mystique the Super Scroll, you should be good to go even in beating Super Scroll, where like a card like Enchantress just beats that kind of setup 100% of the time. And
Yeah.
like I basically just feel like Super Scroll is cool and I get why people are excited to play it, but probably a little worse than just actually playing the card Enchantress in most of those matchups.
Yeah, I think there is this one is very important in a sense that like we really need to know where the people's sentiment are with these cards because
Yeah.
like the difference between like Rogue versus Super Skrull and Enchantress versus Super Skrull is also very different because like if it's Rogue, right? Like at least if you play okay, if it's Enchantress, sorry, if you play Super Skrull in the same lane as their Miss Marvel, for example, let's talk about Miss Marvel. If they ench, it enches the whole thing,
Yes.
right? Like everything is gone. So it's very different than getting it rogue because
Yeah.
your opponent still maintains their like Miss Marvel buffs. So it's very I don't actually know the direction that this is going yet, but like, I feel like it really depends on like how much rogue, how much enchantress, and obviously and also how much tribunal, which will decide how much rogue, how much
Yes.
enchantress. So it's an interesting time for sure.
I mean, that brings us very cleanly to the next topic, which is, of course, the right tech cards. For the past month or so, that answer has been, yeah, you just play Shadow King. But
Yep.
now Shadow King isn't doing very much. Like, yeah, it's still okay, but most decks are pushed toward having an ongoing answer, and then their default option tends to be like Shang-Chi a decent amount of the time because you end up with like something like, Enchantress Shang or Rogue Shang, depending on how much you want to go after the tribunal specific decks and how much you're willing to just be like, all right, I'll take the 50-50 on them. Me personally, I have Rogue in my Loki deck still because I'm like, yeah, I'll take the 50-50 a decent amount of the time. That's fine. They're taking 50-50s against me. I'll take a 50-50 against them. I don't want to pay 4 in any other matchup, and Rogue is way better against opposing Miss Marvels than Enchantresses. So that's sort of where my head is at with it right now. But that could very easily change if I started seeing a lot more of the Tribunal deck. You know what I mean? If I was
Hmm.
seeing Tribunal everywhere, I'm not seeing it everywhere. I'm seeing some of it, but I'm not seeing it, I think, to the degree you're seeing it. I'd probably have to make a different decision. And I think this is when people talk about metagames, these are the things that define them. How much you see a specific deck and how much you have to tech against it. And for that reason, people talk about like certain decks being only good in certain ranks, and I to some degree that's true, but what really makes it work is the tech you play in the deck has to be on point at any given time. If you're running into it, if you see a deck that has like Shang-Chi in it, understand that Shang-Chi could probably be any other tech card depending on what you need it to be. And I think that is a key understanding that people need to figure out if they want to rank up because knowing how to customize that part of the deck is very, very important. A lot of the time, cards like Shang and Enchantress, they are add-ons. They are cards you are playing to answer something specific. And if you don't see that thing that they're meant to answer, you should feel confident in moving them out of your list.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of glad that this month there isn't as much competitive incentive as other months, because like some other months there's a lot of tournaments and like stuff
Mm,
going on. So I feel like this month, if this month was a tournament, it'll be very chaotic, even for myself personally, because the direction that you go towards when it comes to tech cards is so difficult this month, right? Like let's just say, okay, so SK dropping in popularity because Tribunal is going up, but then because SK drops in popularity, Loki decks get to run a bit more free because there's less SK. And then, of course, Rogue and Enchantress, the whole debate on which is better, which is more energy efficient for your deck. I mean, because I play Loki, so like, I have more freedom when it comes to tech cards, because if it doesn't work, you just Loki it all away. But there's a lot
yes.
of decks, right? There's a lot of decks, right, that like, you want to run Rogue, you want to run Ench, you want to run Shang, you want to run SK. There's no space to run all that without compromising your engine.
Yeah.
And certain decks just fit certain tech cards better than other decks. But what if the tech card that fits your deck better fits the meta worse? Does that mean you just retire your deck and play another deck? You know, like this is that one. I wouldn't exactly call it that one meta, but like this is the one time in a long time that I feel like I'm also quite confused, like what I should do if I'm not playing exactly Loki.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good time for experimentation, and who knows, maybe someone will crack it like soon, because well, it's rather confusing right now for me.
Yeah, I think the existence and popularity of the Tribunal deck puts a downward pressure on the metagame that hasn't really existed in a while. Like, this is just not a position most people have been in for a while, where they have
Mm.
to respect something that could just go drastically over the top of them. And also, and this is a key point, doesn't suck, right? Like, most of these decks that traditionally are like, I'm going to go way over the top of you, Mr. Negative, Hella, they kind of suck, right?
Yeah,
Some
they
of the
naturally don't
time,
do well.
right. Some of the time they just die to themselves. And the difference between that and Tribunal is very consistently going to do a thing. It might not be the full combo, but it'll be a combo and it'll be a lot of points, and you need to have an answer. These metagame developments have solidified a trend that I've been paying attention to for a little bit now, and it is that Destroy keeps getting sadder and sadder as time goes on. After Nico came out, it was like, okay, this is like a solid, legit tier 2 deck that's actually pretty good. And now things just keep getting worse and worse for it. First, Tribunal comes out, and that's like basically unwinnable if they pull the combo off. You just actually cannot win. You 100% die. Second, people start teching against Tribunal, and that means usually two cards show up a lot of the time. They are Enchantress, and that is Mobius and Mobius. And if the people are not playing Enchantress, maybe they're playing Super Scroll, maybe they're playing Rogue. You know what Enchantress, Rogue, and Super Scroll are really good against? Null. You know what Mobius is really good against? Death. And so the deck just gets sadder and sadder and sadder and sadder and sadder. And it's like, oh, people are still playing Shadow King. People are still doing all the stuff that beats the crap out of you. And Destroy just keeps getting a little bit worse every passing week, I feel like. And I felt like that was worth a trend worth calling out, because it's a deck that I have tended to like. And it, along with a deck like Shuri, for example, like it's just been like slowly decreasing in viability in a very saddening way because of tech cards showing up that it is tough for them to beat.
Yeah, the amount of splash damage that is being dealt to Destroy is crazy right
Yeah.
now. Like I always talk about Destroy in all these videos and all my other like content as well. That it's like one of those decks that I like to play in Conquest, because like your locations are sort of like your 13th card that you benefit off, because Destroy has so many beneficial locations. But this meta right now has come to the point where I don't even think it's worth playing Destroy, even though you get beneficial locations, because it just gets like beat up on by so much additional things that people are running, not even for Destroy, right?
Yeah.
Like the splash damage is too big. Like the SKs that are running around a little bit here and there, still not, even though it's less popular right now. Your Anchors and your Rogues and your Super Scrolls for the now. The Mobius coming back for a little bit just to hurt the death. Like, and then on top of all of that, your deck needs to draw in a very specific order, because that's a Destroy deck for what it's worth. So all these negatives don't really supplement the fact that yes, you do get benefits from a lot of like Destroy locations, but the overall sentiment is that I feel this deck too much are going against it, that isn't even intentional, by the way. It isn't
Yeah.
even intentional, but there's too much going against it to warrant it being successful right now. Like it is clearly, I haven't even seen the deck in days,
Yeah.
actually.
Let's talk about a card you will see a lot of. A card we have seen all the time, and that is Miss Marvel, everyone's favorite 415. Everyone's favorite, why is this card still a 415? Miss Marvel is at this point one of the strongest cards in the game, I would say. I have a like Ronin deck, which is actually secretly just a Miss Marvel deck. Like you look at it and you're like, nice Ronin deck, KM. It's like, no, it's not a Ronin deck. It's a Miss Marvel deck. Like I'm playing like Storm and whatever, and Ronin is actually just there to be like what Gamora was in the old lockdown builds, just big five. Sometimes you need that. And that is worrying, right? Because Miss Marvel is extremely, extremely strong. Doing something like, Miss Marvel, Mystique the Miss Marvel, play a Doctor Doom. Very powerful thing to do against anyone who isn't going wildly over the top of you. However, this is also a metagame that is slowly turning against her. We talked a lot about how there's more ongoing hate happening right now than there previously was. Do you think that this could be something that pushes Miss Marvel a little bit out of the metagame because she's so predictable? People are playing Echo, Rogue, Enchantress, Super Scroll. Every card that could possibly deal with ongoing cards is showing up a lot here.
Okay, so from my personal experience and what I think is gonna happen, right? I personally feel that Miss Marvel will not become less popular because the card is just so busted. Like it will not become less popular, but your way of playing Miss Marvel needs to change because you need to adapt a little bit. Like people used to just Zabu Miss Marvel, slam it, and then like that's fine, nothing happens. You
Yeah.
are either supposed to play Cosmo now, or you're supposed to accept that your Miss Marvel effect will never stay the same if you play it that early. Because the whole world has counters for it. So you are either supposed, okay, Echo is the least popular one. So the way I'm looking at this right now is that you are supposed to Miss Marvel late as possible. Like your final turn is like 3+3 Zabu and then 4 cost, that kind of thing. That's how I feel like you should be playing on Miss Marvel, because if you play on Miss Marvel on curve now, right, and like your opponent knows it's there, it is the premium target for every tech card that they put in their deck for ongoings, right? So you're either gonna Miss Marvel into a Cosmo to keep it safe, or you probably should not Miss Marvel on curve. Or if you Miss Marvel on curve for whatever reason because you have no choice, you get snapped. You need to respect because everyone has tech for ongoings right now. So I think Miss Marvel's popularity will stay because, as you say, 415 is nuts. It's crazy. It's not even difficult to be a 415. It's so easy.
Yeah.
But like the direction and the way that you play Miss Marvel right now needs to change a bit. If not, you're gonna be losing a lot of cubes to people that have been adapting to Miss Marvel.
One other thing that I've been doing recently is being like, all right, well, it kind of looks like they have the tech for my Miss Marvel. I'm just going to load up a lane with stuff that would turn Miss Marvel off because I'm expecting them to turn it off
Yes.
anyway. Like there's situations like that where it's like, all right, well, they're going to rogue my Miss Marvel. Can I beat them if they rogue Miss Marvel? And then you just do the play that beats that. Like it's one of those things where it's like, yes, they have the tech card, but it's something you've talked about before where it's like, all right, well, I know enough to let them Shadow King this and I
Yes.
can still win. And that's the same way you have to think about your Miss Marvel now. She's this high priority target that is likely to get dealt with in some way. And so what you need to do is set up for a situation where they think they're making the game winning move, but you have already prepared for it. And that is how you have to act with your Miss Marvel now.
Yeah. Just want to add also that last time we talked a lot about like letting your collector get shanked, knowing it will get shanked, knowing it
Mm-hmm.
will get SK'd. Miss Marvel's a bit different in a good sense, which is if you know it's gonna get Enchantress, if you know it's gonna get like echoed sometimes, maybe it's still a 4/5. It's like decent
Yeah.
stats. So the cards that beat Miss Marvel don't really kill off the card. Like it's not like it
Yes.
gets shanked, right? There's 5 powers still sitting there. So it's like you can win a Miss Marvel lane that gets countered, or you can win the off lanes that get countered. Just know what the counter is and then play accordingly. Like KM said, stack lanes with multiple same cost cards because it doesn't matter, or like just like go big on one other lane because
Yep.
you know like you're gonna lose 5 from that left side or right side. You know, that kind of thing. It's not that's also one of the reasons why I really think Miss Marvel will stay, because like the counters to it work, but it doesn't make the situation bad for you. You know, there's still a
Right.
4/5 there, right?
Yeah. Let's just give a rest in peace to a Nihilist Bounce, a deck I loved. Like it's so sad. This is a deck we finally thought we had one that was better than Loki. We thought we were there, and I think we probably were, and now we're not again. And that is because not only was it more reliant on Wolf than Loki because it doesn't have a card like Loki in the deck that can just be like a game plan in and of itself, it was also a deck that was pretty reliant on Black Widow Beast. That was just a very powerful thing to be doing. And now that we no longer have the option of going like, any one drop Black Widow Beast is like kind of the most broken thing that deck could do. Now it cannot do that. And we just end up very sad. Like our best draws were either one drop Black Widow Beast or one drop Black Widow Wolf, one drop Beast. And like those are basically unbeatable and they're just totally gone. And it feels like basically like the top 20% of your draws just got completely chopped off the deck. And I am pretty upset about it. I'm very sad. So just pour one out for your local bounce player, me. Lamby, do you think there's anything we can do with the bounce shell that isn't Loki at this point?
Currently, okay, so in my current testing, I feel like the deck is the most reliant on Werewolf compared to any other deck, correct? Like
Mm-hmm.
Werewolf. So okay, we you talked a bit about like Black Widow, the perfect curve of like Korg, Widow plus Beast. Yeah, that's also gone. So there's no more curve that like hits as hard as that one
Yeah.
anymore. Plus Werewolf is coming out a turn later. And in this deck with Werewolf being even more of a hard carry than in the Loki deck, all your knives are a bit blunted and like not
Yeah.
sharp anymore, which is like, and then the Annihilator stuff just doesn't get there because it's not enough build up to the Annihilator stuff. So I feel like currently bounce is it's like stunted. It can't really do what it used to do, and it's really just because of the Widow and the Wolf nerf. I haven't found a successful version of this outside of just Loki yet, because Loki doesn't have to rely on bounce. So
Yep.
yeah, I mean, hopefully we get another tool to, or like a nerf or buff to certain things to let the bounce engine thrive in not Loki. Because honestly, I don't see it anywhere else other than in Loki right now.
Yeah, and that's really frustrating because it's actually stronger in other decks, but Loki is just a one-man army. And so
Yes.
I will say I even cut Werewolf from my Loki deck because it has just been so consistently poor at 4. And I think that sort of raises the question of like, man, moving that guy to 4, geez, does that constitute just like killing the card? I kind of think it might. Like this was a card that was utterly dominant, incredible, 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 incredible. They touch it with one balance change, and it's like, oh my god, I have to cut that from every deck I play it in now, and that feels unpleasant to me. I'll be honest
For me,
about
it's a
that.
bit, yeah, for me, it's a bit different because like I still value the power of Werewolf as like a monster. Like specifically in Loki, because I run Zabu as well, right?
Yeah,
So
you're on like Zabu Werewolf Enchantress. I'm on Bishop Rogue Shang. So
yeah. Yeah, it's really just because like if I don't have the Zabu, I just relegate myself to just not playing Werewolf and slamming Loki. It's just perspective, right? Like
yeah,
if you have like Zabu into Werewolf into Loki, you're just chilling, you're just winning. It's the same. So yeah, it really matters. Depends whether you have the cuts on curve, but yeah,
yeah,
it's a lot worse for sure. Werewolf, sadly.
yeah. Finally, just wanted to wish y'all happy holidays. I, of course, I'm Jewish. I'll still be streaming all the way through it. I think Lambie's going to take a couple days off, so this might be the last time you see him for a little bit. But thank you so much for, you know, sticking with us for 8 cubes. It's been a blast to make this show, and I'm grateful. I know we did like a Thanksgiving thing. It's I'm still grateful. It's a month later, and I'm still grateful. So thank you all. Really appreciate it. And of course, thank you, Lambie. It's been very fun doing this. And thank you, I do want to say, to the random person on Twitter, I believe their name was C Parks, who did this design for what you're currently looking at. They did this design and they were like, "Oh, I just did this for funsies." And I messaged them and I was like, "Hey, can we use that design? Can I buy it from you?" And he was like, "Oh, you can just have it. Here's the design." So huge shout out to C Parks because that is so sick. And I really enjoy what the quote unquote set looks like now. It's very nice. So thank you so much for, I guess, supporting this content as the community of people that listen to this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, C Parks, for that as well. This looks really good. Also, I've done a lot of like thank you stuff in the last few videos because I've been like winning stuff and flying all over the place. So I've done all of that already. But like, I just want to say for this one, yeah, I will be doing like 1 or 2 more streams for this year. But yeah, gonna take some time off for holidays to just enjoy the rest of the year. This was a great year for us in general, like Marvel Snap, for myself, for KM. I think we've both grown quite a bit. We've both got to know each other a lot better. We've got to make other friends. Like got to like establish ourselves in the community and stuff like that. So I feel like this year has been great. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, I hope you guys also enjoy the holidays. I hope you guys enjoy this podcast, which will still be back in 2024, of course.
Of course.
And yeah, of
Okay,
course, we will.
I wanted us to sign off. Here's what we're gonna do though. We're gonna like go to we're gonna do a fist bump, but like no, you gotta do the other way, right?
Okay,
We're gonna go like
okay.
right, 1, 2, 3. Oh,
Um,
oh God.
one more time. Let's see. It
Okay,
should
okay.
work.
1, 2, 3. Oh, wait. Pull it
Okay,
back
I
to
got it. I
here.
got it. When you
Put it
say
right.
two,
Just put it right here.
when you say
This
two,
counts.
yeah.
This counts. This is where we gotta go
Okay.
to. Okay, 1, 2, 3. We did it.
All right, that works.